Hello and welcome to Tunze Tech Tips. Today I want to talk about the 6105. So we've launched our new Hub Edition pumps. These pumps now have cloud-based Wi-Fi control systems. You can set pump settings hour by hour. So I wanted to take the opportunity to show you the new pump, as well as explain how you can upgrade your older pumps and service them while you're at it. So first off, we have the new 6105. This is the Hub Edition EcoStream model. EcoStream was introduced earlier in 2024. It was a change to the propeller that made the pumps dramatically more energy efficient. Now they have these much larger propellers, and the housings have to be larger to accommodate these propellers. The propeller is optimized to produce as much flow as possible, and they are very quiet as a result, very stable. There's a lot less turbulence inside the pump, but there you can get a good overview of that. As in the past, the pumps come with two front housings. We have wide and wider. In the past, you had a narrower front housing, and this one was the optional wider housing. These both will fit the propeller. This one should be used if you need to project the flow further. This would also be used if you wanted to put the pump inside a stream rock, as this will fit. And if you needed to protect the front, this one still has the protective grid option that's not available with this one. Another notable difference, you'll see that the pump ends with a waterproof connector. In the past, they were hardwired into the controllers. This will greatly simplify maintenance. Here's the controller. You'll notice that all the packaging is recyclable. That was a necessary change to be compliant with EU recycling rules, but I think it's a good thing, and there's no plastic packaging, but that's how the pump will connect now. And so now if I want to service the pump, I can very simply disconnect it. If we look closely at the controller, you can see that we have manual and cloud. So if we go with manual, we're allowed to set all of our settings just with the push buttons. There's no more knobs. We have a power graph that tells us what setting the pump's on at the present time. Pretty much the same features as the old controller, unless you're connected to the cloud. And we have analog mode, which allows us to connect to a port down here and run the pump with another controller. That would be this port right here. That's a phono jack plug. So for those of you using a Neptune or a Hydros or a Profilux, you would typically use the same cable that's used to run Kessel 0 to 10 volt lights, basically a non-K-Link model light, just that headphone jack style connector. So now we've got that done. Last thing is the new pumps are 12 volt. The new bigger propeller, we're running a large propeller with much less slip and losses of efficiency, and we're running it at lower speeds. So we have the new 12 volt power supply, very simple. And by the way, this motor and pump are the same ones that are used on the current 6255, which is a 24 volt pump with stronger magnets. So you can see from this that there's a lot of upgradability within. You could buy the new one, you could upgrade the power supply, you could upgrade the magnets, you could upgrade to a 6255 that way. If you have an old one, there is a retrofit controller, there's front housings, you can buy all these parts, they're all available on tunze.com, and you can update any pump newer than 2015 to current standards. Basics are the same. So we have our pump, we have our motor assembly, we have our drive unit. The drive unit is fundamentally the same outside of the propeller. If you wanted to update your old pump, this is part 6105.702. Old ones are 701. We've got our disc down in there. I don't think there's any way you'll be able to see that with the camera, but I'll work one out on a pump when I'm showing you the disassembly procedures. But let's move on. So now let's cover updating and servicing a 6105. Here we have an older 6105. This is the one most people are used to. These have been out since 2015. I should point out at this time that the 6105 has been available since 2009. There have been a few large changes to the design. The biggest one was in 2015 when we added the controller. Generally speaking, older than this will not be suitable for updating. Typically a DC pump like this is going to have a service life around 10 years. And that's simply because we're dealing with electronics. Capacitors eventually no longer hold a charge and the motor fails. And this is going to be true with almost every electronic device. They have finite lifespans. But assuming you have a pump from at least 2015 and you would like to do all the things to update it to the newest one, I'll show you how. And I'll also cover service and maintenance while we're at it. So the first thing, front cover. To get this off, what I like to do is take this seam here where the two hemispheres meet, tap it on the counter just like you're cracking an egg, and it'll pretty much just pop open. Then the next thing is the drive unit. Drive unit just pulls out. This is something I really want to focus on because this is critical. A lot of people I encounter have a problem and they've never disassembled the pump this way to service it. If you just throw this in vinegar and water, you might as well have done nothing. That does not clean the pump. These passages in here are quite tight when this is assembled. The vinegar and water will not get in here and will not clean the pump. You need to disassemble it this far before you soak it. There is another part in here, the disc 3005.740. This is a wearing surface and a sound deadener. It's something that on a routine scale you don't have to remove, but you should know it's in there and that it can be removed. You never pull the shaft out. Pulling the shaft out will damage the pump. The shaft should never come out. And what I prefer to use to remove the disc is this pick tool. You'll hook under it and slide it up. I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. It's not a lot of fun, but that's how you would get this out. The other ways to do it are if you have some long tweezers, that would work. Very long needle nose will work, but you have to be careful that the back part of the jaws isn't grabbing the shaft and pulling that out. So I've removed the disc just because I felt that you should get an overview of this part. It's two pieces. A black plastic wearing surface. Notice one side has a slot in it. And then we've got a silicone rubber cup. The disc fits inside the recessed part of the cup with the slot facing up. That way, if this ever comes out, you can have this video to reference. The slot is there to induce some turbulence, and the propeller's spinning, the magnet's spinning against that, and that moves some water to keep those parts clean. This slot can get calcified and blocked up. Usually the only time you would service this part is if you were to get some sand or something really abrasive in this pump. It would grind this down. And you'll see that the base of the magnet has a raised part as well. So these two pieces are interfacing, and if something were to grind these down, you may need to replace both of these parts. You'll tend to have a pump that stalls or get more noise if these are not properly in proper condition. And we put this in so the hard plastic side's up, soft rubber side faces down. You just seat it on there, and then you use the drive unit to push it down all the way. So now we have the older controller. These controllers have essentially been phased out, so if you have an old one that gets wet, your option to replace it is pretty much just going to be the new 7020. So I want to show you how to remove this. This is covered in the manual, but you know, from what I've seen, who reads the manuals, right? So you need to pry off all the knobs. And one tip, always turn all your knobs facing one direction, because you can reverse these 180 degrees when you reinstall them. Just keep in mind that you've turned them all the way clockwise or counterclockwise, and then just pry straight up on them. They just pop right out. That's the base of the knob. You know, I do want to remind people that these knobs are deliberately designed to break. That's to protect the circuit board. So if they're ever turned too far or hit, they will break. They are a fairly inexpensive piece to replace. They come in a 3-pack. That's part 7090.102. Off the top of my head, I think they're around $6 for the 3-pack. So if you break a knob and need it, you can get them. And in a pinch, you can see all that's in there are 3 potentiometers. And you could just as easily adjust these very carefully with a screwdriver if you were in some sort of urgent need to adjust them. But you want to be very careful, because you could damage the circuit board with the amount of force you could apply with the screwdriver. On the back, we have 2 screws. We need to remove those. I'd already removed one earlier. Then we have our connection inside. It's a 5-pin connector on these older pumps. This is also something, this is the reason we cover this in the manual, is if you ever needed to pass the cable through a small opening, you can disassemble these and get the controller off, and then you just have this small plug. So now we're ready for the new controller. The new controller is a much fancier design. We have the same 5-pin connector that the old ones used on these retrofit controllers. This is part 7020.150. This is what's suitable to retrofit these older models. We don't have the waterproof connector on the bottom that the new ones have. Instead, it adapts to this older connector. Okay, so we've got our T15 Torx driver. We have to remove 3 screws on the back. There's a small handle here. I have found there's generally a bit of resistance. It's a fairly tight fit, but you'll pull on this handle to open it. Then inside we have the circuit board. The circuit board needs to be removed for the plug to clear, so we've got to take that out. You want to make sure your hands are dry. If you're in an environment with a lot of static electricity, I would discharge that before you handle the circuit board. Now we are ready to plug in our pump. So same connectors on the old one. We just snap that in. Now we're ready to reassemble it in the housing. And the one key thing is we have this auxiliary port, and we need to make sure that that auxiliary port goes into this opening, so we kind of have to come in at an angle. Now we've got this all assembled. The housing, I want to point out, has a little retainer there to hold the cable in place. So we need to push in slightly so that we get this into the position where everything will go together. Okay, so we've got all the screws snugged up. We're updated to the new controller. Now let's say we wanted to update to the new propeller. The propeller is available as a spare part. This is 6070.102, or sorry, 702. The older propeller was 6105.701. That's an easy drop-in replacement. One thing I want to point out is on the older 6105s, you had 2 front housings as well, but one was narrow, that will not fit. You can't use that with the new propeller. You need to have your wide flow housing. The wide flow housing was 6205.130. If you wanted to add the even wider flow housing, that's 6255.130. And again, all these parts can be ordered on Tunze.com. Then we just reinstall our front housing. And there we are. It's all assembled. As far as the difference between the 6105.005 and a retrofitted one, the only thing you're lacking is that waterproof connector. And the cables are a little bit thicker on these older models. But if you can live with that, you can save some money by just updating your old pump. One last thing I need to point out. So older 6105s were 24 volts. You had this power supply, 6101.240. If you just took this pump and used it with this power supply, essentially you've made a 6255. You just have the weaker magnets. If you want to have the performance and power efficiency of the current 6105, you need to get the 12-volt power supply. The power supply is 3154.120. And with these power supplies, you get a replacement, you get a front tip that you have to install. It just slides on and clicks on. And they do it this way because this one power supply can be used everywhere in the world, and they give you the tip that you need. So we've pretty much covered conversion, maintenance, features of the new EcoStream Hub Edition. But in closing this out, I am going to move on and show you how the Hub cloud system works, logins, configuration. But one thing that I wanted to make sure people realized is that everything I showed you is definitely going to apply to 6105, an older 6155, 6255, the current version of 6255. These are all upgradable, following the same thing. As you heard me mention, the 6105 and 6255 now use the same propeller, and the difference is one's 12 volt and the other's 24 volt. A lot of these same things, the nano streams, are really just the same basic features but scaled down. So the maintenance is the same. There's a smaller disc at 6055.74. There's different propellers. But if you had a 6055 or a 6095 and you wanted to convert it to a 6075, you can follow the same basic procedures. But on those, it'll be critical that you replace that 24 volt power supply with a 12 volt power supply because the motor can't handle that current load. So those pumps, you're going to need to get the 12 volt power supply. Not doing so would destroy the motor. But you would get the front housing, the 6075.700 propeller, and you would be all ready to go with converting it to a 6075. So, this is one of the things we pride ourselves on. We make the same products for a long time. They evolve, we perfect them, and in doing so, we keep a very high quality level, and we're able to offer a 5-year warranty because we know the products, we know what they're capable of, and they're really proven and tested. So you can always update your products. We have a commitment to make sure our customers are taken care of. And any spare parts you need, whether it's to update or something's just worn out, you can order that on Tunze.com and it'll ship promptly. So the heart of the Tunze Hub system is our website, tunzehub.de. The first thing you'll need to do is to set up an account. This is fairly self-explanatory. Anyone who's ever had an online account, it really works the same way. I do want to emphasize we don't collect your data, we don't sell your data, we don't market your data, and we ask a very minimal amount. You'll just put in a username, password, your email address, your name. If you're with a company, you can enter that. Then you'll select a region, German, US, Japan, and you'll select a language. And that's pretty much it. You'll get a confirmation email. It'll have a passcode. The next time you log in, you'll enter the passcode and your account is all set. So now that we're in, this kind of gives you an overview of what we'll see. You'll get your basic system settings. You have your time zone, which you'll need to set, but that's a pretty easy drop-down menu. Whether it's daylight savings or not. Um, then we also have our network information. I'll be honest here and say I'm in a rural area. We use Starlink, and while it's a significant upgrade over the 5G system we used to have, latency still is an issue. And if latency is really bad, you may lose connection. Here we've got our firmware. If it detects that your firmware is lower than current, it'll prompt you to update that. Then we get into our pump settings. And this is a pretty typical system where you can drag your time blocks and set what you want throughout the day. You can get in and really fine tune these. You can set storms. You can set your food timer duration. You can also set whether you want the food timer to have the pump off or run at a low speed. Maybe you're adding plankton or something. You'd like a very small amount of flow. You can set that. But it's really a very comprehensive system that'll let you set a lot of transitions throughout the day. I've kind of just duplicated a lot of them and kept it simple, but it's a very versatile system that, while you can play with it and you can do a lot of different things, I would try to keep in mind that, in nature, flow does not change hour by hour and day by, minute by minute, I should say. It tends to be fairly consistent with the lapping of waves, which would be best done by pulsing, as well as a definite slowdown during the nighttime. But we don't see crazy, chaotic hour by hour changes, and so I would try to avoid turning it more into a toy for yourself than something that simulates natural conditions. Might be fun to play around and see what you can do, but things in nature are pretty rhythmic and constant, and that's going to be very important for the corals because they do sort of learn that pattern and deploy polyps to feed at the optimal times. And the more consistent you have things, the better off you'll be. So the next step in this process, now that we have our Tunze Hub account, is to connect the 7020 to the Hub account. This is a rather simple process. You'll see that the cloud light is blinking. That means that it is broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal. You want to go on a device such as your phone and find the account or the Wi-Fi signal that's labeled TZ7020, and it'll have the serial number, and you connect to that. It'll say no internet connection because it's not actually connected to the internet. You're connected directly to the device, but connect to it anyway. Then you're going to go to your browser and type in the address 192.168.100.1. Now we're connected to the device, and the first thing we need to do is connect our enter the account settings, and that is case sensitive, so we go to cloud connection and we put in the exact same username and password of the account we set up on Tunze Hub. Then once we've got that applied, then we have to go connect our Wi-Fi, and that'll be the network that we actually want to use. For example, your home Wi-Fi network, and you enter that. It'll give you the option to select it. You have to enter the password if it's a password protected account. Now we've got that, and we can set synchronizer device clocks, and now we are ready to restart. Once it's finished restarting, it'll disconnect from the cloud controller, and the cloud controller will then be connected to Wi-Fi, and we should be all set to go. So you saw on the computer end what it looks like. This is what it looks like on the controller. We now have our solid cloud lights. Both lights are lit. The bars are showing that the program that we've set is running. This pretty much concludes the video for today, but I do want to thank you all for being our customers, and just know that we're always working on improving. One thing that has made me very loyal to Tunze, I've dedicated 20 plus years of my life to this company, is that it is a small family-owned company, and we do our best to respond to what customers would like. A lot of customers have been asking for features like this, and now we've brought it to you. And we plan to continue to update this and improve upon it. We're already working on pH, temperature, different controllers that'll connect to this cloud system. And we've approached other manufacturers about working with us on our cloud system, and we really hope to build out a full suite and continue to respond to your feedback and improve the products. Apps will be coming that will make this an even simpler process than it is now, but I feel it really is fairly simple. To be honest, I'm not really a computer person. I'm much more comfortable with gears and motors. And so this is somewhat out of my comfort zone, but even I was able to do it. And I think that says a lot for the simplicity of the product. Thank you again, and until our next video, enjoy your reef, and thank you.